Hi, and welcome to another episode of Breaking Bio Blitz. I'm Morgan Jackson, and this week Tom Housley joins me to talk to Erin Eastwood, who's a master's student at Columbia University.
Hi, my name is Erin Eastwood. I'm a first-year master's student at Columbia University's E3B Conservation Biology program. My research, I'm interested in protecting coral reefs around the world, specifically looking at animals associated with coral reefs like fish that people rely on for food and income. So I work in Fiji in the South Pacific, and it's a developing island country that a lot of people use these small-scale fisheries for food and income. So protecting these species that these people are using is really important going into the future. So one way that we can try to protect and make sure these populations stay here for as long as possible is by setting up these marine protected area networks, MPA networks. And there's a lot of stuff that goes into making sure these MPA networks are as effective and successful as possible. Things like community involvement. There's a lot of different aspects of scientific information that people need. So my thesis is basically looking at a tiny sliver of all the things that go into creating MPAs and setting them up. So I look at the population connectivity of 5 of these species that people use for food and income. So population connectivity is basically the exchange going on between 2 specific spatial areas. So if a reef way in the north is highly connected with a reef over to the west, you know that there's a lot of baby fish being exchanged between those 2 areas. Inform where you want to put MPAs in those 2 different regions. So that's basically the gist, kind of. There's a lot more that goes into it, but that's the elevator pitch of what I do.
Awesome. So, I mean, Fiji is a pretty awesome place to do field work. You guys are all picking places that are fantastic.
It's not bad.
So how many fish are generally on the menu in these small-scale fisheries in Fiji? Is it everything? Anything goes, whatever they can catch is going to come back to the plate?
So there's actually, there are definitely fish that are more tasty and bigger that people try to target. So there are fish that are under more pressure, more fishing pressure, like groupers and a lot of the top-tier predators that are bigger. Those are more selectively targeted. But as those fish start getting fished out, or maybe a little more overfished, they're harder to find on the reefs. A lot of the things that they eat are then more selectively targeted. So it's kind of like fishing down the food web. And so the species I'll be looking at, I think 2 or 3 of those top-tier carnivores, predators, and then a lot of herbivores as well that are now becoming more and more prevalent in the fishing markets, like parrotfish and unicorn fish. And in Fiji, those fish have been targeted via spearfishing for quite some time, but now that those predators are actually getting harder to find, they're being targeted more often, so there's more pressure on them.
So I have a stupid, naive question about these connectivity patterns. What's the actual goal of looking at these populations? So you were talking about the gene flow between different populations. Is this to try and maintain genetic diversity, or is it more so that if you target one population, then it doesn't totally screw over another population, or a combination of these?
Yeah, so there's actually, there's actually a lot of different things you can deduce from these genetic materials, so genetic information. So you can cover a huge amount of information to provide to these management officials, which is really great. So one of the things is, yes, to maintain genetic diversity. That's always a big, biodiversity, genetic diversity. Those are always big conservation priorities. Another thing is that you can essentially find out what the patterns are between which populations are supplying larvae maybe to other populations, or which populations are kind of out on the fringe all by themselves and self-recruiting and not having a lot of genetic input. So in the first case, where you have a population that's supplying tons of larvae, you really want to protect that area if you uncover that pattern, because if that reef is protected and it's safe and those populations are able to last for a long time, they can potentially like reseed other populations that get wiped out because of maybe an oil spill or a storm or something like that. So the source population is very great to protect for those reasons. And then if you uncover a population that's really genetically isolated, you want to protect that one because they won't be getting reseeded in case of disturbance. And also there might be higher levels of like endemism or species that aren't really found in other places, or maybe subspecies that are really unique. So you want to protect those just on the basis of their intrinsic value to biodiversity as well.
Obviously a very complicated subject for everybody to try and keep on track of. How much, so these are really small scale fisheries, you said, and obviously they've been sustainable at the small scale for millennia at this point, I would assume. Is this kind of changing now that we're getting a lot more global trade? Are some of these small scale fisheries turning into medium scale fisheries with bigger chances for exports? And how, if so, how is that impacting these small reefs?
Absolutely. So actually, these small scale fisheries, I would say it's kind of a combo of them being scaled up due to like market drivers. Like as coastal populations expand, there's more of a demand for selling your fish to make money. So there's a lot more pressure because of those market forces. But also, these species are pretty vulnerable to other aspects of like coral reef degradation, like sedimentation that comes from deforestation upriver, these nutrients being washed out into the ocean and affecting the coral reefs that these animals rely on, and other things like habitat degradation, like the fisher folk who are actually going out and possibly, damaging some sort of habitat. So there are a lot of different factors that affect these species' long-term survival, and protecting them, like cordoning off a little area, protects them both from a fisheries standpoint as well as from like a habitat, more large-scale threat kind of aspect as well.
So is this going to have to be a kind of ongoing project in terms of if you cordon off some area and the fishermen aren't allowed to go there, but then they maybe like there's heavier fishing in other areas, so are you just going to have to keep going and looking at these, or can you kind of predict what's going to happen?
Yeah, so that's what I kind of mentioned, that like what goes into MPA planning is extremely complicated. There are so many different factors to consider, and that is one of those factors is fisherman displacement. If you protect an area of the reef, you're going to displace all those fisher people who were initially going to be fishing there, so that's a factor to consider. Is there other habitat for those fishermen to go to? Because, and this is my little personal spiel, but I don't think conservation and economic prosperity are at odds with each other. I think that there are ways to make sure that we can protect these species, but also protect people's livelihoods. So that's always the goal, especially in these areas where people's livelihoods are so intrinsically connected to the reefs. So yeah, there are a lot of different factors. It is an ongoing process because when you put in that MPA, you need to make sure it's working for everybody involved. You need to make sure people are educated and dedicated to keeping these areas pristine. And there's also a lot of time, over time things change. So there's a lot of like adaptive management that needs to be taken into account. And that's a great skill that hopefully we here are learning, is like how to tackle those issues. So yeah.
Awesome. Well, I think that's a great spot to end it off. Where can people follow along with your journeys and with your work with conservation?
So I blog as well. You can find my blog at eastofthewoods.wordpress.com. It's like my name, but scrambled around. I also tweet a lot, so at eastofthewoods, that's my handle. We'll be tweeting a lot from the field. I launched a crowdfunding campaign, so I will be like communicating a lot with those people who helped me reach my goal. So if you follow my blog, my Twitter, you'll be able to catch all those updates and pictures and potential videos. So yeah.
Awesome. Well, good luck with the field season, and thanks for talking to us.
Thank you. It was great. Have a good day.
That's it for this week's episode, but if you or somebody you know is interested in joining us on Breaking Bio Blitz, make sure to drop us a line at breakingbio.com, or contact us on Twitter at breakingbio, or drop us a line on Facebook by searching for the Breaking Bio podcast. Thanks for listening.